New Year, said old him. Elon Musk has rehashed his beef with South Africa, accusing Africa's most industrious country of racism, saying the reason why Starlink does not operate in Africa's most industrious country is because he is white. But here is the fact. Elon Musk has been using the US government to mount pressure on countries where his Starlink business faced resistance. For example, in Lesotho, when Elon Musk was confronted with the issue of ownership or local ownership in his business, President Trump put 50% tariff on Lesotho. Lesotho's government made exception for Starlink to operate in Lesotho, and then President Trump reduced the tariff to 15%. He tried to use the same pressure tactic on South Africa and has been doing so for the past 1 year. President Trump has thrown everything he can at South Africa, hoping they would bend to the will of Elon Musk. And as it stands right now, nothing has happened. South African government is yet to bend to the will of Elon Musk, and that is why he keeps accusing them of racism, playing the victim. My name is Senabi Tony, and this is Africapitalism, my bi-weekly analysis of Africans getting to the bag. And this week, we are talking about the world's richest person's attempt to establish his internet dominance in Africa. And now, let's get right into it. Elon Musk, as we all know, is worth over $725 billion, making him the first human being to be worth over $700 billion in the history of the world. And he's expected to be the first trillionaire in the world this year because his company, SpaceX, is expected to go public this year at a valuation of $1.5 trillion. Now, Starlink's valuation is highly driven by SpaceX valuation is hardly driven by Starlink because, as it stands now, Starlink is the only branch of SpaceX that is making money. That is because Starlink have moving from just a concept to an actual utility that is functionable. As it stands now, Starlink operates in almost every continent on Earth. In Africa alone, Starlink operates in 25 countries. And what is Starlink? Starlink is a satellite internet service provider, and usually satellite internet is kind of dicey because it's not as fast and robust as other forms of internet, but like 4G, 5G, and the rest. But Starlink is actually better than every other satellite company that's ever existed. And why is that? Most satellite internet providers use something called GEO. It's called geostationary Earth orbit. What that uses is that it means that their satellite orbits the Earth at a height of about 36,000 kilometers above the Earth. Starlink uses something called low Earth orbit, which means that their satellite orbits the Earth at about 550 kilometers above the Earth, which means that it's very, very close to the Earth. And so what they do is that they have about over 9,500 satellites that orbit the Earth, which means that their satellite is able to cover the entire Earth. And for context, the US as a country has 8,500 satellites, some of which include SpaceX or Starlink satellites. You understand that? Then company that has the second highest amount of satellites outside of Starlink is OneWeb, which has about 648. So basically, Starlink has a huge monopoly when it comes to satellite ownership. And that is huge. And also, Starlink is a good product. They don't need to have fiber or other, towers to be able to operate. The satellite connects to your dish, and then you are able to get internet. Very revolutionary product. Very good product, right? But what a lot of people don't know is that the Earth, who owns the Earth? That's a philosophical question, but generally speaking, the government of every country have ownership over the space in that country. That means that the soil of the country, the airspace of the country, and the waters of the country. Which means that while Starlink has satellite, their satellite can't just be hovering around every country like that. Every country would have to give Starlink permission to orbit their country. Otherwise, they can just shoot it down. You understand? And so that is why Starlink needs permission to operate in every country, generally speaking. Now, there are other ownership-related issues that has to play here. But let's focus on the business ownership. Because Starlink's business is providing internet, they need license to operate in every country. Again, every country owns their digital space, generally speaking. And in African countries, almost every African countries, the countries themselves do not have money to set up their own telecom or internet facilities. So they allow for companies to do it in those countries. And so foreign ownership in almost every African country when it comes to telecom is very liberal. In Ghana, a foreigner can own up to 100% of your telecom company and nothing happens. Same in Nigeria. That is why the first country for Starlink to start operating in Africa was Nigeria. Starlink have been operating in Nigeria since 2023. Starlink have been operating in Ghana since, I believe, 2024. And in these countries, right, the ownership situation is they register their company in this country. SpaceX owns about 100% of the company and they are good to go. But in South Africa, ownership of a business presents you with something else. In South Africa, you need to have 30% of your business owned by historically disadvantaged groups. Historically disadvantaged group in South Africa mean that somebody who is either black, disabled, or what was the name, a woman. It doesn't have to be a black woman. You can have a white woman have ownership in your business, and your business is good to go. So let me say this: about 600 multinational companies from the US operate in South Africa. Microsoft operates in South Africa. Google operates in South Africa. Amazon operates in South Africa. All these huge companies operate in South Africa because they find ways to obey the laws of South Africa. Right? A lot of time they partner with local owners in South Africa. There are a lot of billionaires in South Africa who would want to, partner with Elon Musk, right? But Elon Musk doesn't want to do that. He wants to retain full ownership in in South Africa. Actually, Starlink sort of operates in South Africa. How they operate is they allow Airtel, Tigo, I believe, and other telecoms to, is it Airtel? I don't quite remember the name of the telecom companies that Starlink collaborates with in South Africa, but there are some telecom companies that use Starlink satellite to provide internet for people in South Africa. So Starlink operates in South Africa. They just don't operate direct to consumer. What they are trying to do now is to get a license so that they can operate direct to consumer, so they can sell their dishes and internet service directly to consumer. And that is what they need license for, and that is where they are hit with the 30% ownership requirement, which is the law of South Africa. And let me explain something to you. Every country on earth has a history that influences ownership decisions. In Ghana, for example, a foreigner cannot own land for more than 65 years. Why? Ghana has a history where our forefathers fought with the British to keep our land owned locally. So we cannot disrespect our forefathers by allowing just anybody to come and own land perpetually in the history of Ghana, right? You understand that? Good. Nigeria, for example, to have a TV station in Nigeria, 70% of your TV station has to be owned by local people, Nigerians. And if your TV station is a cable or satellite TV like DSTV, you need to have 20% Nigerian content. That is why there are so many channels on DSTV dedicated to Nigeria. There is a law in Nigeria that requires that. You understand that? Now, in the US, if you have an airline or a domestic shipping company or a television or radio media company, 70% of your company should be owned by US citizens, not permanent resident, US citizens. So a foreigner cannot own a TV station in the US. You need to have an American own about 70% of your TV station if you're a foreigner. So much so that Rupert Murdoch, the owner of Fox News, had to become a US citizen to be able to operate Fox News in the US. And he had to do some deals with the then president of the US to get him to be able to own TV stations in the US. You understand that? Every country on earth has ownership laws to protect segments that the country deems sensitive. The reason why telecommunication ownership in the rest of Africa is not considered sensitive is because, like I said, capital. And actually, that is about to change. There is a new AU after digital trade protocol that is ensuring that ownership of the digital spaces in Africa is concentrated in Africans. So the thing that even allows Starlink to operate in 25 African countries might be changing very soon, because this protocol was passed somewhere in 2024, 2025, thereabout. And so it will start taking root from this year. You understand that? So let's make it clear. South Africa is not racist against Elon Musk. South Africa has laws. Elon Musk feels like he's too special to play by the laws of South Africa. He wants to be given a preferential treatment. And he's not getting his way. So he's throwing a temper tantrum. That is what this is about. So one of the things I like to do on Africapitalism is to paint a big picture of the state of capitalism in Africa, because I'm a huge capitalist, but I feel like capitalism needs to play by the rules. If I go to I cannot do anything I want in the US. I'm not a US citizen. You understand? The same way, Elon Musk, even though he is birthplace in South Africa, he has to play by the rules of South Africa. And there is a historical reason why the 30% historically disadvantaged group ownership exists in South Africa. That is, the history of South Africa, apartheid and whatnot. That is what I wanted to highlight on this week's episode of Africapitalism, that if you want to play in business in any country, you should play by the rules of that country. All right. Thank you for watching. My name is Senebe Tony, and subscribe to my channel if you are interested in more intellectual conversations like this. I'll talk to you later.